So, Caroline, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's lovely to talk to you, Natalie.
Well, likewise, and I'm particularly excited about this conversation because you bring what I've experienced to be quite an unusual and life-affirming approach to questions around technology
Mm.
and how we might relate to it and flourish in times of rapid transformation. And so, I'd love to kick off our conversation today by asking if you were to conceive of a global human psyche, what would you sense or imagine is going on in that psyche at this moment?
It's such a beautiful question. I don't presume to know what's happening in everybody's minds, but I sense, as a feeling body, as a feeling human, I sense a lot of uncertainty, an enormous amount of unease, not feeling grounded, overwhelm, fear, slivers of hopefulness. Mm, just lost. A little bit of like, I don't know how to move. I know there's something calling me. I know I'm yearning for something, but I don't know how to move in this moment because it all just feels so complex and so big. And, um, and I don't know what I can actually do. It all feels quite ugly as well. I sense a lot of engineering smallness, so protecting what I can protect, my immediate spaces, my immediate people, just steady on, do what I know to do, just move on. And even though there's other stuff that I really need to be paying attention to, which is existential, I'm I'm profoundly locked into a system that's making me and urging me to keep pushing forward in the way that things have been, and it feels I sense that people probably feel that there's something diametrically wrong with that, but they don't know how to move.
That's really interesting. There was a post I saw the other day on LinkedIn where someone was talking about kind of this tendency we seem to see in many more individualistic cultures of when facing into uncertainty and when there's a lot of complexities, you say, change, disruption, disintegration, and a sense of precarity, which many people have been, myself included, have been insulated from in more affluent imperial countries, this sense that the tendency can be towards introspection, which in its own way, you know, it has its value and its place. And I love introspecting. And I like spending time by myself. But in its own way, it can also cut us from collective action, which I wonder, when we're thinking about the ways in which AI encourage us to think about our own value, i.e., become more efficient, skill up, augment, become more productive. And it can be used for many other things too. So I think it depends very much on the mindset with which you approach it. That there seems to, it's really easy, it seems to me, to sort of fall into this idea of I've only got my own individual self to rely on. And this kind of closing in or this being stuck and getting lost could be helped if we just were able to find somehow a more expansive, connected state of mind, I think. What's your thought on that?
I just all of it is just so spot on and so beautiful. Um, I feel like I want to pick up on a few threads of what you said and tell me if I'm heading in a direction you don't want this conversation to go
Go
in.
for
But
it.
okay, so a couple of things in terms of the introspection. It comes with a double-edged sword. We do need a massive global awakening around who we are as a human species and what our actual function is on this planet. And it's not to be a productivity engine, and it's not to be single-minded for an acceleration of profit or growth or extraction or even like supreme excellence. Like I find those words so demeaning in a way, because excellence in what? In all these functions and ways that we've limited the value of a human being, which is performative. And I think the excellence between humans, like you point to, relies in the relational field. It relies, it lies between us. So I just wanted to mention that. And I also want to mention, so I do think introspection is necessary because there's something beautiful that happens if you do really pick up on practices. You could, pick up on westernized practices of mindfulness or deeply indigenous practices, or African practices like Ubuntuism or whatever. Once you pick those up, once you fully grasp what they're pointing you to, which is a deep dissolving of the I and a reconnection with the infinite interconnection of the world, you move differently. And so we need that. We need people to recognize that there's not an I, that no individual can survive or be or exist without this is gonna sound so bizarre, but I have this beautiful tree out my window, and I have a relationship with this tree and all the trees. I could move myself to tears thinking about how grateful I am to that tree, because it is nourishing me. It's giving me the oxygen that I get to breathe. And in relationship with it, it's not a separate thing from me because I'm exhaling the carbon dioxide that it needs. So I'm in constant relationship with it, and the same goes with the birds, and the same goes with the ground. And I could just, if you dissolve into everything, you realize how you are absolutely everything. So that's a little philosophical, but I felt it important to mention that. And then I will also mention that my root teacher is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's a Zen Buddhist, and he was very firm. He's not a firm person. He's a very gentle soul, but he was very firm on this idea of engaged Buddhism, meaning we don't do contemplative practice just for our own settling of our nervous system or our own awakening. It all is in service of a larger, a far larger, I hate to use the word scope because it feels so mechanical, but a purpose.
Unfolding, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a beautiful word. Yeah, far larger unfolding. And he's also famously said that the future Buddha is not a Buddha, it's a Sangha. And a Sangha is a group of people who've come together, who share a worldview around moving with intention and compassion. So I'll say that. And then the third thing I'll say is, so I think we need to move from introspection to engaged action. And the third thing I'll say is there's a difference between empathy and compassion. And I think people misunderstand it. Right now, we're in a high empathy mode, meaning we're feeling and resonating with all that's happening around us. And we need to transform that into compassion, which is seeing the pain, observing it, touching it, actually witnessing it, and clearly, not with, gold-covered glasses or rose-covered glasses, but actually witnessing it, feeling it. And then that's the empathy part. But then moving on to how can I be of service? How can I relieve that suffering? Or even if it's just a wish, if it's not an actual action, even if it's just a wish that softens your heart, that helps you move differently, that's really important. There's empathy leads to empathetic distress and empathetic exhaustion. But if you know how to move from empathy to compassion, and a lot of that has to do with, essentially a wish for the future well-being of the people who are suffering, and an intention to relieve that suffering, which is compassion. It's an active thing. Then empathy changes into something nurturing. So we need to recognize that. And then the comment about the community, I mentioned a little bit with the Sangha, but I truthfully, deeply believe this moment is calling us back into place, back into honoring the people that surround you, that care about you, that are your neighbors, that are here, the trees, be in community with everything, and in place. I think we're too diluted. Our relationships are too thin. They're too spread out. We need thicker relationships. That's really it's the essence of trust, and it's the essence of truth, right? We can only trust with thick relationships, and we only know truth if we experience it ourselves and see it ourselves, like, especially in the AI world. I really think a lot about that. How can we operate when everything that we're exposed to could be a delusional representation of created by an AI? The only way we know is if we become and reintegrate into our bodies and sensing beings and re-experience reality in place. So
there
obviously
are so many places to go with
yeah,
this.
obviously we need all kinds of, AI governance and watermarking and provenance clarity and all these things, but they're not there yet. So in absence of those things, we need to become more human. And what I mean by that is become more integrated, become more grounded in place with people, and work on the thick relationships.
I love that imagery, and I think also there's so many things that come to mind. One of them is there's just too many images in my mind. One of the things I was thinking of as you were speaking, and you started talking about the tree that you live with, and the relationship to that tree. And in our previous conversation, when we prepped for this, you're talking about re-enchantment. And often what I'm struck by, I'm doing a series for Do Radio at the moment, we're recording about creativity and how so many of us will say, I'm not creative. And there's something very curious that threads between concepts of, or the thing that the word creativity points towards, and imagination and community and entanglement and people and place and community. And it's something about vitality that brings all of these things together. The vitality of life, and calling things into being, or being witness to something which is ever emergent. And there are so many ways to root yourself in that practice that might feel so foreign to the conversation around AI, which is quite abstracted, quite nebulous, and predominantly very quantitative. And it's all about information. And that's great. But I think there is something so interesting about the way that we can relate to that when we root in. We recently had, we moved flat last year, and it's been like a year and a half process of uprooting, literally, although the last flat didn't have a garden, and this one had concrete out the back. And we've gone through this prolonged kind of ripping out the concrete. I didn't. These amazingly strong, very determined group of gardeners did it. And now finally we've got some trees in, and spring's just about to come. And we had this huge carpenter bee visit one of the little trees, this sort of cherry tree we have. And it almost bumped into me. It's a big bumbling thing. And it was just so exciting to see life return to this, what had previously been a desolate place. And I think that also creates this pocket of enchantment where, to your point, you enter back into the magical weft of reality and all the beauties it can hold. I know it can hold terrors too, but to be attentive to that, so that then when we are making decisions about how to use our technology, our grounding is in beauty and relationship. Because if we don't make choices from that place, I don't think that there's any tethering at all, apart from to a structure which is extractive and exploitative and is causing a lot of harm. So we can do so much better than that. There's got to be a different system that we can imagine and dreaming to being from a grounded place of interconnection and beauty and love, really.
Yeah.
This is going in a totally different
No, it's all good. I will tell you the imagery that you created with ripping that concrete out and having these heavy burly men trying to extract the mechanistic and productive nature of contract from the earth and return it to vitality.
Yeah.
Is precisely what we have to do with ourselves as humans and our technologies. So I will. I'll go into that. There's some very predominant worldviews. See, I have a lot of compassion for where we are right now, because all of us are moving in this world believing that we're doing the right thing, because we have been conditioned to believe that what we're doing is the right thing. Not all of us, many of us. For example, I have a 17-year-old son who's looking to go into college, and he's, working really hard to get his, good grades on the exams. He's also an athlete, so to get the metrics that he needs to be recruited as an athlete, and is looking at the best schools, and so he's doing what's right, like this high achievement, right? And we get out of college and we go get the job, and the job is this, powerful job that has influence, that creates meaningful products for the world or services. It achieves a certain level of efficiency. It makes profit. It does all the things that we were told were right?
Yeah.
Like, as a leader, that's my path. I'm doing that path. So we're all doing what we kind of have been conditioned to be told it is the right thing to do. Here's what gets interesting. With AI, it is such a disruptive force. Not even just AI, quantum, bioengineering, all of these forces are so disruptive in this moment. The reason why I'm talking to you and I talk to as many people as I can is because I believe this is a fertile moment for us to completely reimagine the future of civilization. But in order to reimagine it, in order to have that enchanting vision of the future, we have to be willing to let go of some paradigms that have kind of locked us into this thinking that what we're doing is right. And as long as we're kind of just nudging around that, we're not actually achieving the potential that we have with this moment. I want to pause before I go into what those worldview changes are and just ask you, just out of curiosity, you have such a beautiful way of expressing yourself. So I'm sure there's something gorgeous that's going to come out of this question, which is, if I were to ask you to imagine the most vibrant, beautiful, meaningful, joyful, thriving, flourishing future for humanity in the age of AI, what would that look like? Paint that picture for us. Like, what would that look like?
So there's the things that I would like and the things that I would like less of. So things like a life of dignity and connection and proximity. Mm-hmm. So people to have access, no matter who they are, whatever body they're in, whatever age, culture, all of this, to healthcare, to community, to ways of healing, food. There would be a lot of music, a lot of craft, a lot of dancing, a lot of gathering, ceremony. There would be innovation, imagination. It's not that there wouldn't be any competition, but it would be in service to a goal that is in service to life. And AI would support us in facilitating the administrative stuff that maybe we don't want to do, or solving complex problems that require huge data, but it's collected in such a way that it's interoperable, it's reliable, and it reduces things that we find hard to reduce between and among ourselves, like bias or inequality. I don't think it would flatten humanity's structures as a whole, because I think there are always dynamics and structures, but it would make them less cruel. And it would restore greater vitality and diversity to Earth's natural systems. There's just so much we could do.
So, and use your senses. Use your senses. So, removing the ideological ideas. Move your senses. What are you smelling? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What are you touching?
So, I would have way less synthetic stuff in the house, which we're trying to do at the moment, and it's quite difficult. So way more natural materials. I love the sensation of wood and stone and marble and things like linen and cotton and things like this. And I don't know if you had this in COVID. I live in Barcelona, and there was a time where there were very few cars on the road because we were all in quarantine, and you could smell the most extraordinary scents on the breeze as springtime came, and you could see the swifts from your window because they would come all the way down without the disruption of cars. So those are some of the senses that I would.
Yeah.
You know,
And
these
what
delicate,
color? What
powerful.
colors? What colors are you seeing?
Well, lush green because I love trees, and then all of the flowers and berries and yeah.
You're not
And
alone.
then, yeah.
You're not alone. I mean, that's, first of all, I will say, most people, when I ask that question, really have to think and take multiple beats because we don't have a vibrant, beautiful vision of the future of humanity in the age of AI. We don't. We just have, we don't just, but mostly we are surrounded by very dystopian ideas.
Totally.
And some people have a very efficiency-minded idea or mechanistic idea or reductive idea of how technology can support us in our own grandiosity. But when you really pause and you really ask that question, and I have asked this in multiple rooms now, I'm almost surprised but not surprised by how everyone's picture points to a far more nature, life-centered aliveness. There's an aliveness of life surrounding us, not just human life, plant life, more than human life, and obviously, you know, a transcendence of the call it human frailties, enabled by some of the technological intelligence, but which points to a human betterment, a human maturation, a human awakening, if you want to use those words, right? So there is that longing for something that is far outside the conversation that we have around AI. Yeah. The conversations right now are, you know, how many tokens and how intelligent and can it beat a PhD level thinker? And none of it is around actually, can we align AI with life? Can we enable AI to support human flourishing and human maturation? Can we ensure that the systems that we build, because one of the things I think a lot about is our current economic systems, our current governance systems, our current social structures, our current educational structures, our current family systems don't work in the age of AI. I can tick each one of those off if you'd like to get into it. I
would love to dig a little bit into
it. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where your audience is. So, I mean, okay, so let's just look at economics, right? Yeah. The principles of a capitalist system is to return profit, and you return profit, you maximize profit based on your inputs, right? So you have a certain amount of inputs. The more you maximize profits, returns, the higher your profit. I'm not explaining that well, but that's the principle. What that has led to and was leading to is an extraordinarily extractive engine. Where we take from the earth, we take from human liveliness, by the way. I also see humans as an extractive, as something being extracted, in order to produce profit. There's two problems with that. The first is you can't, as the saying goes, you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. It just won't sustain it. And I don't think people really recognize how dire the situation is right now. Not right now. It's been growing, but we are in a life-extinguishing path that is very near. It's not even far. It's within 40, 50 years. So I really struggle with understanding why people aren't just acting with incredible swift to fix the system. So the first is the economic model doesn't work simply even as it is without AI layered on top of it, right? We can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. The second is you add AI, which operates on exponential scales. And what do we have? We have displacements of human labor in the next 1 or 2 years with agentic forces. Once you displace human labor, people won't have a job. If they don't have a job, they can't purchase goods and services. If they can't purchase goods and services, then the companies offering those goods and services can't sell the goods and services, which means that they collapse and society collapses, right? So you can just see, okay, let's just follow that. So that's just a second idea or second facet. And the third facet is, if you have AI that can so perfectly recognize what your preferences are, what is important to you, who are you with, where you are, you're no longer you no longer have free agency to participate in a system of economics, right? The economic, a lot of people talk about economy and capitalism as being sort of the pulse of choice, right? Like money is just an indication of value of what you care about. But in AI, in an AI context, as nefarious as it already is, right? Like we already know that these technologies are being deployed to manipulate our decisions and our purchasing decisions. It's no longer free market. It becomes an extraction engine of our own wealth, and perfectly so. So again, and it concentrates power, right? Yeah. So, you've heard people throw around terms like feudalism and oligarchy. That they're not wrong. Those terms are here because that's actually what's happening, right? Yeah. Like there's these huge powers in AI that are just concentrating wealth and data and therefore wielding power. And that's not a free market. That's a concentrated power structure, which goes against capitalism. So capitalism doesn't work. And we need to reimagine our economic model. I'm hopeful that because more and more people are waking up to the fact that capitalism no longer works, that there will be more fertile ideas for a future economic model. And there's some ideas at the periphery, right? Like universal basic income, which is very functional. Right? Like if we give people money, then they can continue this economic model. It's a Band-Aid. It's not the solution because, again, the other two problems of concentration of power and so on, infinite growth on a finite planet don't work, even with UBI. So I'm more and more interested in concepts like regenerative economics, which aligns economic models with living systems, trying to understand how we can be in right relationship with the things that nourish us and nurture us in a day-to-day life. So that's just an idea for people if they want to pick up on. That's economics, right? That's just, okay, so let's talk about governance. We're already seeing a tremendous amount of corruption around the world in governance models. You got to lay the AI power on top of that. And the word corruption changes from a exchange of cash to a mobilization of power. So if I am a country that has an alliance with an AI powerhouse, a mega powerhouse, then I can essentially wield my desires to the rest of the world. The scales of power, the balance of power changes completely, which means, again, that we don't have a uniform globalized participation in our global governance, right? So that's a huge problem. It's already happening. But the second problem, let's just look at democracy. Let's just look at how democracy works. Oh, sorry. Let me put up the second problem. The second problem is that there's too much industry interest in governance, right? It's too interrelated. And that creates a future where government is no longer supporting the wishes of the people, but actually supporting the wishes of the industry. And under the worldview of economic growth, the industry is going to undermine democracy.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the second problem. And the third problem is democracy itself. How can human beings exercise quality votes if what they're being exposed to, if the information that they're digesting is perfectly manipulated? And, I don't mean to say that everything is nefarious, but it can be nefarious, right? And again, the power structures and the incentives are such that it's more likely that it will become nefarious than it is not. So democracy doesn't work. Let me also say, okay, let's project into the future 15 years from now. There's a lot of contention around what I'm about to say, and I think we need to have some really important conversations around it. But let's just say that we have agents, whether they're in physical form or in digital form, right? Like it's easier to think about it as like a robot embedded with AI who's now acting in the world and participating in society, in living systems, and so on. Do they get to have a say in our future democracy? I think they do. I think the vision that I have is that with AI, this is going to sound so off, but hold it with a little bit of possibility. Like instead of judging it right away, like that's ridiculous, hold it with a little bit of possibility. If the potential here, I'm painting all these awful dire things, but the potential here in terms of governance is if we were to understand what leads to flourishing in living systems and more than human beings, and perhaps even be able to understand the language that different more than human beings express, from the mycelium network to whales, right? We could, and then we have the agents, right? AI agents. We could feasibly create a future where governance isn't just human governance, it is a council of life. Mediated by AI, because it helps us recognize the needs, the true scientific needs of nature in place to flourish, and of the more than human beings to flourish, and our human beings to flourish. All of that could actually lead to a far fairer, balanced governance system. It's a little idealistic, I realize, but it's a potential. So hold it with potential.
Well, let's dig into it. So there's a really interesting book that was written. It's called The Children's Fire by Mac McCartney, and it references a practice in which elders come around a fire and each represent a different perspective on decisions made by their communities. That any decision that comes from that place will not harm any offspring or baby or children of any of the kin, whether it's trees, insects, birds, fish, mammals, so that any decision that comes forth won't harm the children of all of these different species. And there's something about that in what I hear you talking about with AI. And I love the idea of it, and that there's, with practices or like organizations like the Earth Species Project, and there's other sort of anti-poaching systems that use similar technologies that I've come across. There's extraordinary potential in being able to understand, on the kind of cute side, and I love dogs, what your dog might be wanting to express to you, or perhaps less verbal animals like horses, perhaps, or, if you stretch it further out, cetaceans and all of that kind of stuff. And yet the first time I hear people talk about this, first I'm filled with awe and excitement, and very rapidly in succession, perhaps layered within that sensation, is a preemptive grief of the ways in which these technologies will be used to lure and kill other beings. So thinking about whaling, it would be, well, what if we understand how to replicate a whale mother in distress, and then you kill an entire pod because you want to eat them? So there's something which I know is really bleak. So to me, it's kind of all of these possibilities are to be played for. And yet the question that I always find myself, and I'd like not to, but I'm yet to be moved to a place where perhaps a different possibility is within reach, even conceptually. But I keep returning to this place of how much our structures would have to change, and how much perhaps there would have to be some kind of awakening of conscience in order for any technology that we create not to be used to extract further. And it goes exactly back to what you're saying about extractive paradigms. That
Mm-hmm.
so, and I worry that we're accelerating so fast along this power-hungry trajectory, and that we have such little wisdom with the structures that we have, with kind of these. Nate Hagens and Schmachtenberg were talking about this in terms of ecological niches for hyper agents, so people who have outsourced impact in the world through their agency, like the Musks and Nadellas of this world, or whatever, that their decisions, especially if they stem from wounded places, have such an outsized impact on the trajectory of billions of lives, not just human lives, that even if X number of us wake up and say, okay, I want to opt out, it's a wicked problem. How do we do it? Like, for instance, I live with this tension every day. This is a recurring theme of conversation with me and my friends and my partner, is how do I do something different? I'm still working to make money, to look after the flat and to be able to dig the garden. And yet my leaning is so much for, there are lots of tensions that we carry within ourselves, especially when we become awake to the grief and suffering in the world, and how so much of it could be abated if we just had different incentives. There's a misalignment there.
You're speaking to the biggest dilemma that we're facing, which is how do we change the system from within the system? And when we have an enormous concentration of power. I wrote a piece that I didn't publish yet, but the first thing I said is we have to challenge our notions of power. And I'll just leave it there. I think until we really recognize how incredibly possessed we are by this distorted idea of power. There's no singular power, as we already talked about. We're infinitely interdependent. So until we challenge our notions of power, I don't, and that's, that's for all of us, but also for the top of the house in the AZI companies. I don't see a viable future. But I think what you're pointing to is some of the worldview changes that I was hinting at that also need to happen. And I actually think they're not changes, they're remembering. It's like, what if we could dissolve all the ways that we've been told how to be, like take the concrete off, actually we would discover that this is who we are. We would remember that. And so let me name them just so that we can share a certain nomenclature and understanding. We already talked about the move from extractive and exploitative mindset, which is, what can I get from you, the planet, the thing, for my benefit, to regenerative. And when I talk about regenerative, people don't really know what I'm talking about often. So let me just name that regenerative isn't just about, improving the planet, right? Like protecting the planet from crossing the 7th and 8th and 9th boundary. It's about recognizing that we depend on healthy surroundings. And what we have right now, part of the reason why we're all feeling so sick and so fragile is because nature around us is fragile.
Yeah.
So we can't just stop doing what we're doing. That's like not enough. We actually have to heal and improve how nature is with us. Because you heal that, we heal ourselves. Yeah. So the regenerative mindset is not just, net zero, which a lot of people are talking about. It's ultimately net positive, but more beautiful net positive. It's actually, imagine yourself as compost. Like, how do you move in this world so that every step that you take leaves behind this really fertile ground? That's what I would love to have people think about. Okay, so how do we create the conditions for life and heal life around us right now? So that's regenerative. The other thing that we really need to it's a mind twister, because so we've been all very well educated. And in the education system, we have been taught the scientific method, for example, right? Where you take a problem, you identify the real problem behind the problem, right? That's like one of the best things that you can do is like, what is the real problem that we're trying to solve? Okay, so then you take that real problem and then you figure out all the ways to figure that problem out. right? And by the way, if you're, I'm not, but if you were a scientist, you have to eliminate all the potential influences on your sample, right? So like really, really, really narrow down so that you can absolutely understand what's happening in the system. Because of that, we've made tremendous leaps in our scientific understanding, in our technological progress, in our efficiency, for example. But because of that, we have cemented, to use your metaphor again, this idea that things can be separated. And that we are therefore separate. So it's a mechanistic, reductive worldview that sees things as pieces of a process that can be isolated and uniquely studied, when in fact everything is nested. Everything operates in a larger whole. And we know this from quantum mechanics and quantum physics. We cannot remove the thing from the rest, right? And I think it's high time that we stop thinking in linear forms, linear mechanical forms, and start thinking in nested, systemic ways of thinking. So that's the second one. The third one is related, and that's, I'm going to say it and your audience will nod to it because of the work that you do, but perhaps besides power, the most profound delusion that we have is that we're separate. And of course, I've talked about it already. And so we need to return to this understanding of interconnection, and I can talk more about that. Could even lead you through meditation if you like to, but that's the main thing. And then the next one is really this thinking that we have, which has to do with human, like even the words human-centric are giving me an allergic reaction these days, because everything is about improving life for the human and at expense of everything else most often. And it's this bigotism, it's this
exceptionalism as well.
Exceptionalism, it's this, I don't know. It is once again forgetting our true place in the world, which, yes, we are at the top of the, call it the ecological hierarchy for now, because AI is going to leap and bound us beyond that. But that doesn't make us the dominators. That makes us the necessary stewards. Your audience is very contemplative. So let me just point to, I had a deep realization about 10 years ago when I'm a deep meditator, and I was meditating and I was thinking, why, if you think in a Buddhist fashion, you believe in reincarnation. So I, was contemplating on this idea of reincarnation. And so I was asking myself, like, why was I reincarnated as a human being? What is the gift of being a human that puts me in this place, right? Of course, there's suffering, and we all know this. But what I got to, and tell me if this resonates with you, is this incredible realization that because I'm a human, I am a sensing being. Because I'm a sensing being, I can relate and feel in me the pain in others. That leads to wise action, right? That leads to action that is in context. The second thing is, because I'm a human being, I can speak and I can write, and therefore I can share my ideas, and I can be influenced by other people's ideas. Therefore, I'm on a path of, it's possible for me to be on a path for higher awakening, because I can learn from an infinite number of people that existed before me what it would take for me to become a wise steward of this moment and expand my consciousness, right? No other being can do that other than human beings, right? Other beings can resonate, but no other human being can be on this path of awakening, if you will, right? Because we need the realizations that come with lived experience and shared experiences, and the ability to share our hard-earned wisdom with other people. So in this small lifetime that we have, we're on this sort of like our own exponential scale, because we get to learn and share and express what's the path to a higher, let's call it a maturation of our species. So we mature. And because of that, because I had that personal realization, I kind of got to a place where I said to myself, well, gosh, I'll have to say something else to make perfect sense of this. So forgive me, I'm not telling the story very well, but that was one. The other thing that happened, it happened in 2015, and my dad had died, and we had a property in Florida, and it was a place that I was raised in Italy. So coming to Florida was kind of like our vacation, our highlight reel of our lives, right? Like it was beach time and fun, and it was a place that I had a lot of attachment to, because I had some of my best memories there. And so before letting it go, I went for 3 or 4 days to just be in the space, and honor that moment, honor all the memories, and have sort of like my own ritual to be able to let go. And so I turned it into a retreat, a personal retreat. And so I'm sitting there in meditation, and I practice contemplative meditation. So I'm sitting there in meditation, and all of a sudden this question pops up in my mind, which is, how did I even become a meditator? And I go through my life, like kind of a vision, like a movie reel, like my life in reverse. And I say, well, was it because I met this person, or was it because I went on retreat, or was it because I read this book, or whatever it was? And what I realized was it had nothing to do with any of that. It had to do with a conversation that I had with my dad when I was 12. Wow. Where he had said, in answer to somebody's question, he had said that he was agnostic. I didn't know what that meant at 12. By the way, I was raised in Italy, so English was my second language. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, well, I think there might be something, but I'm not quite sure what that is. And I would just prefer to say that I'm agnostic. But if you really push me, where I kind of lead to is, I think the Buddhist understanding, it's not a religious, it's more of a mind training. I think the Buddhist understanding is closer to what I think. That conversation is what made it possible for me to be open to receiving a book. I think at the time was Dalai Lama's, Art of Happiness or something, which I read, and then being open to having a conversation with someone else and being curious about it, because it was just a seed that was planted. So I was 12. My dad was not a meditator, right? He just kind of like, idea. I took that idea. I became a meditation teacher, because I think it's really important for me to know how to convey some of these learnings, because conscience and wise action is so critical in this moment. So I became a meditation teacher. And then I looked at my children, and at the time they were 6 and 3, and I had taught them how to meditate, but they didn't know it was a practice. For them, it was just a way of being. Yeah. So, we breathe, we had this game, or I would call it the world on your plate. Yes. Did I tell you this? So
I'm also just mindful of the time, though, because we've got 5 minutes left.
Oh, shoot. All right, well, let me just jump to the fact that they became meditation practitioners. And what I had this realization about, what I realized in that moment was, gosh, look at these 3 generations. In just 3 generations, it went from an idea to a daily practice. Yeah. It was like a compression of time. So I'm saying this because if we are human beings with the capacity of reason, language, learning, and communication, and we recognize that change, profound change, can happen within 3 generations already now, right? Like within a span of 30 years, profound change can happen. Then we get to realize that the way we move in this moment can profoundly affect the way that we move in the future. And it gives us a responsibility, right? Not as dominators of this moment, not as power-hungry, functional, mechanistic thought thinkers, but as regenerative, life-centered, life-affirming stewards of all of life.
I mean, I just want to have this conversation for the next 3 hours. There's so much that I'd love to ask you. Maybe you might be open to a part 2 for this. But given all of this rich territory that we've covered, and just also the what I feel a lot from hearing you talk is a sense of active hope, of this sense of there is change that's possible. It includes all sorts of elements, but fundamentally these are practices that we can all access and make steps in kind of experiencing in our own lives literally now. And I know that you teach meditation, so that's something that is a very practical way into what you're describing in terms of that transformation and change. But I'd like to end here for now, which is, given everything that we've touched on today, if you're going to offer people one question to dwell with, and it might be one that we've already touched on, or maybe it's a different one in terms of where we've landed, but what would you want people to contemplate or take away as a question from this conversation?
How can you be in right relationship with life? And right relationship is a mutuality. It's an exchange. It's a gratitude practice. It is a humbling practice. It is a dissolving of the capital I into the allness. Not even the we-ness, the allness. And I say that specifically because I don't want us to think just human-centric. And being in right relationship is a gentle mode of moving. It's not extractive. It's not dominating. It is profoundly... you stand in your own beauty and your own wholeness, knowing that you need to emanate that way in order for everything else to be able to unfold to its highest potential. And you move in a way that helps everything else unfold to its highest potential.
Thank you. That's a beautiful place to land.
You're welcome.
And I'm very close to tears. I have been several points in this conversation.
We didn't talk about AI at all.
I know.
Let me say, part of the reason why I go here is because I think this moment is quite sacred. I think the technologies that we're building have the potential to wield such power that it could profoundly change life on Earth, not in the best direction. And I think the only way we're going to get to that future that you painted so beautifully, or a version of that, is if we dissolve the concrete that we've built around our ideas and our way of being, and coming back into recognizing our own aliveness and our own participation in this thing that we call life, and how exceptional it is. So let's make sure we guide our technological futures to honor and to respect and to be in right relationship with life as well, not just ourselves, but our technologies.
Wonderful. That is just such a beautiful call to action, I was going to say arms, but it's not, to the flourishing of life.
Yes.
Caroline, thank you so much. I will link
You're so
to
welcome.
HelloHumanity.com in the links.
Thank you.
And I would love to have another conversation and talk about 3 horizons and the 8 principles and all of these amazing things that I had stacked in my notes that have just been left to the side for another time.
It wasn't meant to come this time. It'll come next time.
Sometimes you just have to be with the magic. Thank you so much. What a gift.
You're so welcome. Thank you for making time to speak with me and to make these conversations have air and have space and have and take root between us. So thank you.